when the world has got you down. And
Alzheimer's sucks. It's an equal opportunity disease that chips away at everything we hold dear. And to date, there's no cure. So until there is, we continue to fight with the most powerful tool in our arsenal, love. This is Love Conquers Alz, a real and really positive podcast that takes a deep dive into everything Alzheimer's, the good, the bad, and everything in between. And now, here are your hosts, Susie Singer-Carter and me, Don Priest.
Hello, everybody. I'm Susie Singer-Carter.
And I'm Don Priest, and this is Love Conquers Alz. Hello, Susan.
Hi, Donald. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Good?
How are you today?
I'm good. I'm very good. I'm excited because today we're going to do something a little different, right? And it's really the beginning of a special series of Love Conquers Alz episodes, which is inspired by our soon-to-be-released documentary. In case you haven't heard of it, it's called No Country for Old People. Did we said it enough?
Have we mentioned it? Have we ever mentioned it?
Did we mention that?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Maybe once.
Well, if not, it's a documentary it's a film that pulls the curtain back on the nursing home and long-term care industry to reveal what is actually a cutthroat world of private equity, real estate investment, trust-backed nursing homes, and it also has a very powerful lobby that makes it their business to keep everything status quo. It's a profit over people business model in which understaffing is used to generate enormous profits that the owners tunnel through undisclosed related party transactions, aka money laundering. And as a result, we have neglect and pain and suffering and also death. And that's become, sadly, the industry standard. And it's a standard that took an egregious toll on my mom's physical and cognitive health and ultimately cost her life. I didn't really know this before this gentleman that I'm about to introduce, that we were in a full-blown systemic crisis and that it's one that's been causing insufferable consequences for decades, and not just for the elderly, for the vulnerable, for our disadvantaged, shall we say. But until I had this guest, which is Rick Mountcastle on Love Conquers Alz 2 years ago in 2022, when I was in the throes of trying to advocate for my mom, it wasn't until Rick came on and he told me this wasn't just my story. This was actually a systemic crisis. Rick Mountcastle, just in case you haven't heard of him, is a former United States attorney, an award-winning federal and state prosecutor. He prosecuted Purdue Pharma for fraudulently marketing OxyContin, and he was portrayed by the actor Peter Sarsgaard in the Emmy award-winning Hulu miniseries, Dopesick. He also investigated and prosecuted nursing homes for fraud and abuse for many, many years and never saw any significant change. Rick is also the co-producer of No Country for Old People, and we're so glad that he is. And he is also today's special guest host. So welcome, Rick. I'd like to welcome you on as our special guest host today.
Thank you, Susie.
How you doing, Rick?
And Don. Yeah, I'm doing great. Great to see you guys, and thank you for having me on. This is a very special interview, and I'm excited about it. I'm looking forward to it.
Right. I mean, today's guest, I think the reason, before we get into introducing our guest, I just want to say that the reason why we're having these kind of a little bit of outlier episodes is because while we were doing these documentary, we really realized how important it is to educate the public about what is actually happening in our country's long-term care facilities, as well as our skilled nursing facilities. And we wanted to share some of the powerful stories that we didn't include in our documentary from real people, real families who have tragically learned the hard way, like I did. And we want you guys, the audience, to know that this is not just somebody else's unfortunate story, because it really is all of our stories. We're all going to be ill at some time. We're all going to grow old, hopefully. and we're all going to be vulnerable and need help. So that's really important that we share these stories. And we have a lot stacked against us, the prejudice, the ageism, the ableism that plays a huge role in neglect and abuse. And also the fact that it doesn't really matter what our facilities are rated. The rating on the facilities are just marketing. They don't reflect what's actually happening within those doors. So whether they're a 1-star, a 2-star, or a 5-star, it doesn't really matter, because they're all run from greed, right? So
and that's the system.
It's really based on that.
Yeah,
that's
it's the system. Yeah.
So Dawn, would
Yeah.
you do the honors?
We have a very special guest today, and her name is Jen Trejo. Jen was blessed with 3 amazing kids and 3 beautiful grandkids. And on November 20th, 2019, Jen lost her son, Christopher. He was 31 years old. Christopher lived in addiction for years after being prescribed OxyContin and every other opioid you can think of when he was a teenager for his baseball injuries. Now, after a few years, he was homeless, living on the streets. In 2018, Christopher got very sick. Christopher needed heart surgery and ultimately a partial foot amputation. After surgery, Christopher was admitted into a skilled nursing facility, and that's when the real nightmare began. Christopher and Jen's story was also recently featured on their limited series on Netflix, Painkiller, and it was truly emotional to see, and now we want to hear much more about this incredible and heartbreaking story. So let's welcome Jen Trejo. Welcome, Jen.
Hi, Jen.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming and sharing this story that is heartbreaking. And but I know that it will, as you know, that if we share our stories, we can help other people avoid the kinds of situations that we ran into. And I want to throw this to Rick, because Rick really is the one that connected you to us. And maybe, Rick, you can just, sort of talk about how how Jen came into your awareness and why we think it's important, her story.
Yeah, Jen and I were just talking a little bit beforehand, and we kind of first met, and I would describe it as a dark, crowded, I guess it was some kind of a Irish pub type of place where there was a dinner going on, and I think this was about December of 2021, right after the release of Dope, the Hulu miniseries Dope Sick.
Right.
And I had gone up there. I was invited by Ed Bish, who was an activist against Purdue Pharma. Ed lost his son to an OxyContin overdose many years ago, and so he's been an activist for 20 years trying to get justice for the families of the victims of Purdue Pharma and OxyContin, their fraudulent marketing of OxyContin. And Jen was one of the parents there, and as she'll talk about how her son was a victim of OxyContin as well. She was one of the parents at this meeting, and we were just kind of all sitting and talking, and that's how we kind of got introduced to each other. And then the next day, we marched down to the Department of Justice to protest in front of the department and to demand that the Department of Justice prosecute the Sackler family for all the harm they've done with their company, Purdue Pharma, in the fraudulent marketing of OxyContin. So that was our first introduction. And then more recently, Jen and I were communicating, maybe it was on Facebook or something, and she was, I guess I'll let her tell it. How did you reach out to me, Jen, that caused us to decide, hey, let's have you on this show?
I currently COVID brain. I feel like we've kind of corresponded throughout the years through Ed and through different groups and different times that we were going to go to the DOJ, or you going, or we, who's going to speak. And but this time, I'm very honored that you want to add this part of the story to your, already sad story of what these places do to our loved ones and the care that they receive. So I'm just really kind of grateful that you're acknowledging that this also happens to younger people or to people who can't fight for themselves. And even as loud as I was, I couldn't fight hard enough for him either.
Let's just talk briefly about Christopher and how did he had injuries that he sustained from sports.
Yes.
And from that went into, he got addicted to OxyContin and then
Correct.
other opioids. And,
Right.
and it spiraled out of control, correct?
It did. It spiraled out of control after there. I mean, he was, the protector of all and the big guy, and he was a beautiful human, and he never let anybody hurt anybody else. And so, in that, he, would get in fights and he would get injured. And I mean, he's got screws in his hand from hitting a Marine in the head because he hit his girlfriend, and Christopher was like, no. And so, yeah, it was just a long, horrible tale of a beautiful baseball, music-loving, blonde, gorgeous human, and watching what opioids did to his life, just slowly. Like, I didn't see it, right away. His behavior just started to change, and his hygiene started to change, and just certain things started to change. And I was like, what's happening with you, And yeah, it just kind of spiraled and snowballed really from there. And then, I think, when the prescriptions wear out and the pills get too expensive on the street, obviously that turns into heroin, that turns into meth, that turns into whatever they can get their hands on at the time.
Right.
And, back in those days, in 2010, it was his fault. You know what I mean? The addiction was his fault, and it was his choice. And why should we feel sorry for him? This was his choice. And I learned tough love. That's how I learned to deal with this person that I loved more than anything. And yeah.
So he's a victim. So he's a victim from one system. Yeah. So he's a victim from one system, which is the pharmaceutical, right? That sector, right? So he becomes a victim of that, and then a victim of the healthcare system in general, because there's a stigma against people that are drug addicts, and I say that from experience because my brother also was a OxyContin addicted person, and he lived in my home for 5 years. So I helped him get clean, and it wasn't easy, and I don't think it worked, to be honest with you. But so I have some experience in that, and I know how well that they can hide it for quite a long time.
It was a long time. Yeah. And it wasn't until it got cut out of control that, he just.
Because it's gradual. It's you don't. It doesn't happen one day and all of a sudden, oh my God, you're addicted. And look at all this behavior. It's so gradual. You don't even.
Well, they have to hit rock bottom. That's when we found out.
I wish that so many of the times when I thought rock bottom was there, that was it. And turns out death was
the ultimate.
Was his bottom.
Right.
Yeah.
So I want to jump to when he entered into skilled nursing, because he needed a skilled nursing, right? And so after you got the call from his girlfriend's home, and they were telling you that he's going to die, and you do get him into you get him into a hospital for surgery. So let's start from there.
So we get him finally to the hospital, and thank God I had a girlfriend who was one of the ER nurses at that particular hospital, and she was there because he wanted to leave, and they didn't let him leave. And so, fast forward, his mitral valve had blown and he needed heart surgery. And the cardiothoracic surgeon at that particular hospital refused to do it. And so that's when I first started to learn a little bit. What do you mean? Why won't you do it? Well, why? Like, all of his valves were leaking, but the mitral valve had blown, and it had blown some time ago because he had been throwing strokes every time his heart beat. And so his legs were probably that size with red bumps everywhere. And his heartbeat was pretty much non-existent. So the next day they tell me that a surgeon has agreed to do the surgery. There was a time in that period where the suffering had gone on so long and for so long. And I think it's a really important thing for me to say is that when they brought me the papers to do the surgery, I almost didn't want to do the surgery. I almost just wanted to make it stop, to let him go, because it was just, I can't even explain what it was to see this once beautiful human in this body that was not him. And so I signed the paper. My daughter told me that if I didn't, I would never forgive myself. So I did. And we proceeded to sit in the waiting room and wait for 8 hours. And it worked. He was on life support. But it was funny to go back a little bit. For about 1.5 years, he had been limping on one of his feet. And his foot always hurt every time I would find him. My foot hurts, my foot hurts, my foot hurts. He couldn't wear shoes. It was horrible. And as the blood started flowing throughout his body, his right foot literally turned black. It had been dead all that time. And so the pain that he was in, I can't even imagine, before and after the surgery. So let me see.
Can I ask you something? When you said you had trouble signing the paper, and I understand that too, could you look at him and say he wanted to live? Like, could you see that energy?
I don't think he ever thought I don't think he ever comprehended that he was going to die. I don't think that was a thought that he had. I just think that he had accepted this life that he was living. And it wasn't until we were all praying, my pastor had come and we were all holding hands, the whole family around his bed before they took him for surgery. And he woke up during the prayer and just started crying. I don't want to die. Am I dying? Am I dying? I don't want to die. And so we were like, no, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. And so that was like the first time that I think he kind of realized, it kind of set in a little bit what was actually happening.
Right.
And so, yeah.
That's so important, Jen, because it gives you the decision. It puts the decision there,
sure.
Right? So like with me and my mom, who didn't speak at this point, and I had to convince people that she wasn't ready to die yet, because I would know, because we spoke without words in many different ways. And so, I had to make that choice to say, and I said, I'm not stupid. I wouldn't keep her, I don't want her to suffer and live if she didn't want to go. I don't know. And I certainly did when she did die. But I think that is helpful to navigate. So I'm prefacing this because when you get into the skilled nursing, I think it's important that the audience knows that your son did not want to die.
No. And after his surgery, before his amputation, he had gotten very restless. He wanted to get up. I mean, he's been on the street for years now. And so he's not used to being inside. He's not used to having rules. He's not used to any of those things anymore. And so I don't think the hospital was really equipped to deal with that. And so he was moved out of CICU way before he should have. I should say that he was on life support for 8 days, and we were going to wean him off that day, and he just woke up. I like to say that all of that happened so that I could reconnect with my son for the few months that I had while he was in the hospital and in the skilled nursing before he left. And I think that that was for me, so that I could spend time with him. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But they moved him down to a floor that was not equipped to deal with him. They kept him so drugged. He had his fentanyl patch, he had his methadone, he had his Norco, he had his, every painkiller that you can imagine, which didn't really bother me because as I was watching his foot turn that color and also a toe on the other foot, like I literally couldn't in my brain imagine the pain that he was feeling. But they would keep him so drugged that they would bring food in for him, and I would, wake him up and try to get him to eat. And I have just the most heartbreaking video of him just, slamming on the table with a mouthful of food, just not even awake, just, ow, help me, help me, help me. And then he would pass out again. And so when they finally did the surgery to remove the partial foot and also the toe in the other foot, the surgeon did a really good job. And Christopher started his physical therapy. Well, yes, he still had the fentanyl patch, and yes, he was still on all the drugs, but you could see a little bit of him coming back, like a little bit of his sense of humor was coming back, and I never left his side. And so him and I were, having conversation, and he would start the physical therapy, and he had hope. And I'd never seen that in all of these years. Like, he literally wanted. And I have on video, he was like, I have to, get past this next step or they're never going to leave me here. And I need to move on to the next step. I need to move on, to get better. And so the nurse manager on the floor, we were talking about, now it's time to move into a physical rehab. Well, I didn't understand that a physical rehab meant a convalescent home. That didn't compute in my brain until she started giving me the list of the places that actually would accept him because of his history. And I mean, what do you mean?
Right.
He is a 30-year-old man who needs physical therapy for an amputation for his foot to learn how to walk again, to learn, and no. So I fought with these people, and finally got him in to a place that I felt was going to be good for him. And so they transferred him to this place. And when they transferred him to this place and they were doing all the intake and everything, they said, oh my God, he needs blood. His blood count is so low. He needs blood. He needs to be in the hospital. And I'm like, I've been trying to tell everybody he needs to be in the hospital. What I didn't realize is that I just signed his death warrant by doing that. They put him back in the hospital. They gave him the blood. And now the place where we took him wouldn't take him back, because he was not sick enough anymore. If that even makes sense.
Rick,
doesn't.
I'm wondering if you can chime in. Like, does that, my first instinct is to say that they wanted him out of there, so they said he needs to go back to the hospital. and then now they're not going to take him back because he's too high. He's too labor intensive. His acuities are too high. It's too much for them to take care of. Am I wrong, Rick?
What I was wondering is whether did his history of drug addiction have anything to do with their decision? They didn't want to. Some of those places just don't want to deal with that.
They didn't really say. The only thing that I can say was the doctor there was very stern and that he was not coming back. And so then here I'm out on this journey, search through everywhere that's in driving distance of where we could put him. Because apparently this is my job. This isn't the hospital's job. This is my job. And so
that's crazy. So there was nobody there. There was no
guidance, no
social worker.
I mean,
yeah, there's people.
Yeah.
We would have screaming matches in the hallway, her and I.
The social worker.
He's an addict. What do you want? Like, nobody wants to take. Nobody has, nobody's equipped to deal with the attitudes. Nobody's equipped to deal with it. Well, why not? Why not? Why isn't there a place? He's not the first one. He can't be the first person who needs this kind of assistance coming from this background. So where do they go?
How was his rehab going to be paid for? And that might have had...
Oh, for sure. He had IEHP, which was Inland Empire Health. I don't know. It's like one step above Medi-Cal.
IEHP is not the same as Medi-Cal, but they work together.
Correct.
And this is in California. And Medi-Cal is Medicaid for the rest of the country. And it's a managed care plan, which is oddly enough just for residents in Riverside and San Bernardino counties, which is here in California. We're both in California here.
Right.
So it's interesting that it's limited to those two counties.
Right.
And I'm not quite sure that how it differs from Medi-Cal and or Medicaid. I'm not quite sure, but it's somehow, I don't know, Rick. It sounds like it's a insurance company that has figured out a way to work with Medi-Cal.
Some of the Medicaid programs have gone to hiring basically separate insurance companies to basically administer Medicaid. So what they would do is they'll get money from Medicaid and get of course some sort of a profit for managing the Medicaid program. So in essence, it is in fact a Medicaid program. I mean, this is how the nursing or the skilled nursing facility or the rehab facility would look at it, is he's another Medicaid patient. And then they would then look and say, well, guess what? Medicare pays a lot more for older citizens who need rehab, and they're going to, it's going to be a financial decision for them ultimately.
Really?
Totally.
So I would suspect, and of course I'm just speculating, but I suspect that the reason they didn't want your son in there was because he was going to be, the rate they would be able to get reimbursed for was lower, because it's a Medicaid type program, was lower than what they would otherwise be able to get from other patients with insurance.
They offloaded it on the fact that he's an addict and whatnot. That literally has nothing to do with it. That doesn't even come into play, really. I mean, they're there to rehabilitate him for something that's a structural situation, a mechanical situation, which is walking again, right?
Yeah,
he's not there for rehab.
And so the place that they put him was a place called Waterman Gardens. And it was horrific. It was horrific. So he gets there. They don't have his medication. None of his medication has been sent yet. They're going to get it tomorrow. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? But his medications are going to run out in like 2 hours. The medication should have been sent with him. No. So then So they put him in this room with 3 other people. He had a curtain. He was up against a window. It was smaller than like a camping bed. It was very small. His wheelchair would not fit into the doors of the bathroom. So he couldn't get up to use the restroom. And so he had to use the bottles. Save that for later. And so, and then I'm like, okay, well, tomorrow morning we're going to take a shower. We're going to, you know what I mean? We're going to get up and take a shower. So I went and I opened the shower. Shower is full of trash cans. I don't think anybody's taken a shower in there ever. And so then I walked down the hallway, past the nurse's station, and everybody just kind of stared at me. And I'm like looking at everybody, just like, you know, my kid's here now. Like, what's going to happen? So I go to the physical therapy area, and it's basically a storage area. There is no physical therapy here. They have the bicycle, they have a ball, they have nothing. They have no physical therapy. They have no physical therapist. They had no doctor on staff. He only came every once in a while. They had an RN that came in twice a day. Getting a hold of the doctor was just, I mean, it was just from the get-go. It was a nightmare. And as the days went on,
what would they say to you? What would they say to you when you asked him to, if he could, where's the doctor? Like, what was their answer?
Oh, we'll put in a call. We'll put in a call.
Okay.
Or do you,
and
or,
I would
for,
go back
or you
and
want to
look
take a shower. Yeah. Or he wants to take a shower. What's their answer?
He doesn't want to take a shower. We asked him this morning and he didn't want to take a shower. Well, he wants to take a shower now. Oh, well, it's not his shower time. We'll have to wait till tomorrow.
Okay.
And so
Right.
he never took a shower that entire 3 months that he was in this place.
That's horrific.
So it was just a bed, a very small bed, just a bed. There's no rehab. There's no PT. There's nothing. There's no showers. There's nothing. It's just lay there.
And they would sell cigarettes to him the nurses would sell cigarettes to him at the nurse's station. I'm like, he just had heart surgery. What? I'm sorry. Yeah.
Did they allow smoking in the facility?
No, there was this little patio outside that everybody would just sit there and smoke. And it wasn't until, I think it was the maybe 4th week, maybe the 3rd week, that we actually saw the drug dealer walk down the hallway with his backpack. And subsequently would find a crack pipe in Christopher's drawer.
So this is somebody who obviously is not he's not working there. This is somebody who just came in off the streets.
And you would have to sign in. There was a gate. You would have to sign in and sign out when you left. So they knew. And I told them. And I went and met with the director of the place and was like, this is unacceptable.
So you told
What did they say?
Was that the administrator?
Yes.
What was the response?
And the director. And they would say, he's very difficult. He doesn't want anybody to clean his area. They would blame everything on him. Everything just went back on him. Well, he's here for physical therapy. He's here for, I had to get him his wheelchair.
What happened with when you told the administration about the drug dealer? What was their answer?
Oh, that's not true. He's a family member of a patient down the hall.
Right.
And the nurses selling cigarettes. Did you mention that to them?
We're allowed to do that. They would have packs of cigarettes. The cheap cigarettes, they would literally sell them by the pack and by the cigarette.
It's like a prison.
Except not as nice.
So the day Christopher left the actual hospital, his amputation scar, staples were still in, but it looked beautiful. It was going to heal beautiful. And we were just so hopeful, So they took him into this room, this nurse whose badge was turned around because I asked her to turn it around and she wouldn't, so I could take a picture of it. She wouldn't. They put on a waterproof bandage over the top of his foot. And I was like, no, that doesn't go there. That doesn't, take that off. That doesn't go there. And she was like, no, it's what needs to go here for transportation for all of that. I'm all, no. And I threw a fit and they wouldn't take it off. And I wish that I would have ripped it off. I so wish that I would have ripped it off. So he gets transferred and I'm like, can we take this bandage off now? No, that doesn't have to come off for 48 hours. I'm all, oh my God, take this bandage off of his foot. It's waterproof. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a wound. And you know what that looks like when you take the bandage off. It's going to be all mushy and nasty. And that was the beginning of the end. They took that bandage off.
Did he get sepsis?
It was the most disgusting thing. They actually had to go in and dig out the entire middle part of his foot because the infection was so bad. And then they put him on a wound vac, which was never cared for properly. They had to pack it all in there, and then I would come in and I would be like, I'm ready for, because I wanted to be there for every change. I was there for every change. And it got to the point where they were like, oh, he refused it today. Well, let's do it now. Well, the nurse is gone.
Right.
And I would be like, oh my God. And so it just prolonged.
And did you go to the administration about that, about the wound care?
I went to the administration about everything.
Yeah.
I was in there at least 3 times a week complaining about this and that and the other thing. And at some point they were just like, what do you want him moved? And I'm all, no, I want him cared for. Nowhere else will take him. So let's get this healed so that we can move on to the next step, because we haven't even started drug rehab yet. I have to get through this physical rehab and I need his wound to heal, but his wound isn't going to heal because nobody's taking care of it properly. And so it just continued to get more and more and more infected until he needed his next surgery.
And what's his state of mind at this point? Where is he at? What is he just kind of resigned to the fact that this is the way? I mean, where was he at this point mentally?
Oh, mentally he checked out. He had already checked out. He had already disappeared 3 or 4 times. He would leave in the middle of the day and nobody would know where he was. Somebody would find him down the street. In his
wheelchair. They must have kept him very drugged, right?
In the beginning, they did. And I think throughout they did. I think that throughout, he got his new fentanyl patch every 48 hours. He got his methadone however many times a day. He got Norco. He got, I forget what other medications he was on.
So he was, for the most part, they kept him,
drugged.
Medicated, drugged, so it was easier to take care of him because he was young.
Not take care of him, yeah.
Around his bed was just garbage and urine bottles that were full. That I would go in and just be like, I don't understand. I literally don't understand.
So there wasn't any oversight, clearly. There's not much oversight anyway, but to get people to go and really take a look at what's going on there is your chances are none to zero, right?
No, nobody cared.
Yeah.
Nobody cared. It was just so frustrating to just watch the incompetence of it all and to not have anybody give a shit what is happening and to watch his foot just.
I'm trying to paint the picture for people listening because, my mom was in a 5-star facility, but she also had a stage 4 wound that was being ignored.
Yeah.
Okay. And that it was like, well, this happens and she's going to succumb to that wound. Well, yeah, anybody would if you don't take care of it. Right.
Yeah.
So the difference between my mom's 5-star facility to this, I'm imagining it's at the most a 2 to 3 star facility, or one,
yeah.
right? And what kind of, and there's all kinds of stigma, like we talked about in the opening, which is ageism and ableism, and then there's, other kinds of prejudice that goes along with it. So were there other family members when you were there? Did you see other family members there? I mean, were they just used to not having people advocating, and they had been getting away with all this for that was just...
Truth, I never heard anybody else complain. I never heard anyone else complain. And the people that would come visit would just come and sit out on the patio and smoke with these people. And I never really saw anybody check out. I saw them die. 2 of Christopher's roommates died while he was there, which was also very hard for his, mental health.
Oh, God, yeah.
And
you know what, Jen? Just to validate what you're saying, like throughout doing this documentary, I got so many people talking, like reaching out to me. And in fact, even my daughter's friend, most recently, her father, who was a young guy, had just gone into rehab here in LA for a stroke. And it wasn't, he was not given a life sentence. He was going for a rehabilitation.
Yeah.
And she said, "Can I talk to your mom? Because like every time I go in there, my father is like less a human every single time, and no one's taking care of him."
Yeah.
He did die, and he died. And this happens a lot. Like I heard it from other people. Like seems like it happens quite a bit in skilled nursing.
Yeah. It's horrible. I mean, even the place where my grandmother was horrible. The places where I've been with family members or to see, I have not been to one except for the first one Christopher was at that you were like, wow, this is nice.
How long before Christopher was admitted into skilled nursing to when he passed away? How long is that?
Over a year.
Over a year.
We lost Christopher back to the street as soon as his foot healed. He
So
left.
it did heal.
He left in the middle of the night before the rehab conversation.
How did it heal? How did that happen?
So it was a wound care, the wound back. And it was just an everyday fight to make sure that, the dressings was taken out, that it was packed correctly. I was lucky if it got done, 4 times a week by somebody who would just like lay his foot on like just a plastic bag on dirty blankets and lay his foot on a plastic bag. And I would just, you just sit there and you're watching, you're like, this isn't even a sterile like field. You can't like lay down a pad and they would just, I can't even put into words really. They didn't care. She wasn't qualified. She didn't use sterile equipment. She didn't remove all of the packing all of the time. And so it would just continue to get infected. And I think it was a 3.5 month period of time. Yeah. 3.5 month period of time while he was in this place, just trying to get a wound healed that should have healed in 3 weeks.
Right.
Had they just taken that damn Band-Aid off.
Right. So it finally did heal though, which is
it finally
amazing.
did.
But that's because you were there every day and you were having to exert so much pressure, which is so hard because I know what that's like.
They hated
and also
me.
You're the enemy there and everyone's hating you. And,
Yeah.
you're just the thorn in their side.
They hated me.
Yeah. So he was discharged. Like,
No.
No, he escaped. Okay.
They called me in the middle of the night and told me he was missing and that they had reported him as a missing person.
Oh, okay.
You watched the hope drain out of him. You watched it. I watched it. Like, we had hope for a minute, for just like a window. We had and we hadn't seen it in years. And I don't think he'd actually felt it in years. You know, his brother and sister were coming to visit him. You know, his niece and nephews were coming to visit, and like we were there all the time. And it was, you know, time spent with the family that we hadn't had in like 6 years. You know, and and I have to believe that even though it was an absolute nightmare, it was just for me now to have that time with him. And I just think that it's absolutely outrageous that that's where people are put. I think, like you said, a 5-star place, your mom still had that bed sore, right? I think that's, what do they have to do? You know what I mean? What do these LVNs have to
That's
do?
their
They're only in
job.
charge
It's
of
their
like
job.
six
It's
patients.
why they're
Like,
there.
they only each have
It's
like
their
6
job.
patients to take care of. Like clean them. It's just,
That's part of the problem, that they're understaffed, and so I guess at some point they have to make a decision themselves. Am I going to try to run myself ragged trying to take care of more people than I can possibly take care of? Or do I throw in the towel and just collect my paycheck? And, you know, there's that kind of dynamic at work because of the business model that features understaffing as its primary a linchpin.
So when you said you found that he had hope, right? You said the first time, like you all felt this glimmer of hope, right?
Yeah.
And then you saw it go away
Yeah.
at some point. At what point did you see it go away?
I think the first time that we saw it go away was when they took the bandage off.
Okay.
And I think that was where my fight started. Like really my fight started, and where he was just like, oh, you know, I can't believe that this happened. Why does it look like that? And it was just staples with white skin coming up in between each one, and it never got better. It just got infected, and it surrounded, like the infection came out of.
Oh, it's horrible.
I just can't imagine what he felt. I can't imagine how he felt. You know, I would get millions of texts a day. Mom, when are you coming? Mom, can you bring me snacks? Mom, can you bring me? Mom, when are you coming? When are you coming? And I'm like, I'll be right there. You know what I mean? Like, I would spend in the beginning, well, in the hospital, I spent almost 24/7 with him.
Yeah.
And then when he went to this place, I would be there for like, you know, 6 hours a day, probably.
When he escaped, though, when he got out, Jen, do you think that where do you think he was going? Or was it just flight?
I think he was, well, one time he was seen up where used to be, so I'm sure he was drug seeking.
Okay.
I'm sure. Yeah.
So he wanted to self-medicate.
Oh,
Yeah.
for sure. I'm sure.
So he was depressed and he wanted to get out. And he didn't mention that to you. You didn't know.
No, I started noticing his eyes change a little bit, and I started noticing a little change in him and a little attitude. And I was like, oh God. And he was outside one time, and we went through his nightstand and found, you know, a crack pipe in there. And, you know, what do you do besides scream, you know?
And at the same time, you can understand it. You can understand, you know, him trying to escape mentally from this hell.
And at the same, yeah, and all of that, and also at the same time, he is so drugged already. But it wasn't the same thing, I guess. I don't know. You know what I mean? I can never say that I could go inside his brain and say what he was feeling or what he was thinking. I can't do that. I've never... Opioids make me sick. So it's not
me
something
too.
that, you know what I mean? Which is why I never really understood it.
Yeah, me either. I mean, I think that it's so egregious that, you take somebody with a pre-existing condition. We know that drug addiction is an illness. It's not a choice, right? Like
Right.
alcoholism is not a choice. So you take somebody into a facility that's a healthcare facility, and then you treat them one size fits all, right? So you just start plowing him with opioids that he's already addicted to, and without any concern or consult with a specialist or somebody that would say, here's what we do with people that are trying to, like, how there must be a better way. I'm sure there is a better way to manage his pain as well as his addiction without contributing to it.
I don't think anybody really was concerned
That's
about
what I mean.
anything that has to do with his addiction. I think that's, when you're in a place for so long after you were only supposed to be there for a short period of time, and you're there because of lack of care, and you're there because of lack of concern, lack of staff, whatever the excuse was as to why his infection was allowed to get to the point where he needed another surgery to have more of his foot removed. And then now his foot's like wide open, and we have it on, a wound vac to close it. And now it's like this nightmare, and, his legs are all swollen again. And you're just looking at him like, is he going to die? Like, and I would ask them, is he going to die? Like, where does this road lead, And, finally it's just started closing, like, little by little by little, the big hole that was like probably that far down into his foot that they had removed. And finally when it was closed enough where he could, put on a sock over it, when it wasn't swollen, or he left. It was just enough. And sometimes I feel like, it's my fault. I didn't do a good enough job. I should have brought him home. I should have been able to take care of him. I should have. And it's the same thing with when, like, he was on the street. I should have brought him home, but he wasn't Christopher anymore. He was another person that I lived by myself, and I was afraid. I think I was more afraid to bring him home and to be the one in charge, and
You weren't equipped to do that. That's as a mother, that doesn't mean that you're equipped to handle that kind of situation, which requires experts, right? And so you need to give yourself grace about that, because that's not your job. That's not what you trained to do. That it takes somebody that really understands addiction, and from a medical standpoint, and that's not something you go in and talk somebody out of and stand vigil over them. You have no control over that. Zero. It doesn't. You can love them all day long. It's not going to change a
And our
thing.
system doesn't support that. Our system doesn't support you as a mother and say, here's some options, here's some viable options for you to.
Right. You have to be wealthy. Again, you have to be the 1% who can go
You
to,
do.
what's it called on the beach,
Yeah, the $40,000 a month
passages
places
or
and
whatever. It's not fair.
passages, yeah.
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 It's not fair. It's not right. None of it's right. And this, the situation has been going on for so very long, whether it be elder care or whether it be, this. Why aren't we better? Why haven't we learned how to be better? Why is it all about the money? Why does nobody care? Why did you get into this field if you didn't give a shit about the actual human being sitting in front of you that's hurting? Why? And that was my question all the time.
It's the money. because the money
Right.
is what drives the decisions for these people. Not everybody to get into the system, but that's what it does. And as Rick states in our documentary, guess what, people? It's our tax dollars that paid for the care that your son, when I say care, I put it with huge air quotes around it, was given. Our tax dollars are paying for that.
Right. And I just
Exactly.
want to also add this as a caveat, which we touch on in the documentary, which is the fact that there's a lot of really good providers and frontline caregivers who can't do their job that they want to do. Like, they did go into that field because they really cared about people, they really want to do it. And then they're there because of the way that the business is structured, they fail. And they can't do the job they want to do. So many of them leave the field. And like one of our doctors said, the ones that stay become part of the culture, and a culture begins to form, and then they adapt to that culture, and then it normalizes it.
They get
and
very
so they don't
jaded.
feel like they're That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And they have to, because they either get moral injury every day and go home and can't, want to kill themselves literally, or they leave that business, they leave that field that they loved because they can't work in it. It's too difficult. Or
they go numb,
they
and
adapt.
they go numb, and they stay and go numb. So when you go to them and say, "Wait, how?" They go numb. They shut off in order to protect themselves.
I really thank you for talking about this. It's just,
I'm sorry,
we're not
I
going to
can't
solve
put it
this
into
problem
words
today.
better.
No, you're putting it into words.
Because
You
it's so
are.
hard to process. It's really hard to process as a
No,
human being.
I get it. When you're in it, it's just, first of all, it's overwhelming, and you don't know your rights, and there's just so many levels that are going on at one time. It's just overwhelming. I get it. But you did what you did, and you did a stellar job. You did because I know how hard it is to advocate, and it is brutal. It is
Nobody
brutal.
listens.
Nobody listens.
Nobody
I just
cares.
we'll look into it, we'll look into it, we'll look into it, we'll look into it.
Yes.
That's it. I heard it all day long. We'll look into it. Okay, now it's been 3 days. Did you look into it? Still looking while someone's suffering.
Yeah.
And you tried and you cared, and that's more.
You were there. You did the best you
That's step
could.
one, because so many people don't have family members who try and care.
Yeah.
So
and you're speaking out. You've been speaking out, and you've been up against, like I said in the beginning, two different, crisis, and you got hit from both ends, and here you are standing, and here you are talking about it, and sharing this, and
Do you think this ever going to get fixed?
Yes,
You do?
that's
yeah.
our goal.
Wouldn't that
I think
be
it's
beautiful?
gonna
Wouldn't
take
it be
us.
wonderful?
Yeah, I think it's going to take a movement. I think we need to take it, anything that's super important. We have to, as a collective, demand it. We can't go through traditional advocacy. I know it helps a little bit, and I know that within the opioid advocacy that you guys have been doing a lot of work on it, but it's still there, and it's still I mean, it just you have to make gigantic noise, and huge noise that they just want you to shut the hell up, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's what we need to do, just like any other movement that's been successful, and it's going to have to. It's not, like Rick said, it's not a one and done. It's going to be, it's an ongoing fight. But look at how stupid they are with our climate. What's going on? I mean, people are just selfish and stupid. And so we have to shame people into doing the right thing, and it takes people like you, and like me and Rick, and people that are angry, and that are sick of it, and are hurt by it. You and me, we're hurt by it, deeply hurt.
And it may never be completely solved, but change, first of all, change is incremental. It takes time, but any change is better than no change.
It's better than no change, absolutely.
Any improvement is better than no
forward
improvement.
movement.
I mean, honestly, can I just tell you something? Like today, we had a watch party before this interview. And one of the people that participated when I first started doing this documentary 2 years ago, I sort of got into the caregiving community through another film I did, which was a narrative, not a documentary, about my mom with Alzheimer's. Very sweet, lovely film, real and very well received. Not, it doesn't ruffle anybody's feathers. It's not, it's very, very embraced. And so I remember in particular this woman who had a clubhouse thing that they used to have me on all the time as a guest for dementia care, and very, very much respected me. And after I started this documentary, I literally, nobody would talk to me from that community. And I finally got someone who said, I'll tell you why. Because I said, what's going on? Can I talk about my documentary to your audience? Well, no, you can't. And I'll tell you why. Because you're angry and you're wrong and you don't know what you're talking about, and on and on and on and on. And so, and that's what happened. So here's what I'm trying to say is that there she was today on this Zoom, and I ended up in this, we went off into these like private rooms after to talk about and then come back and discuss sort of what's in the future, how do we see the future looking for nursing homes. And there she was, of course, as you would have it, I end up with her. And she is so committed to helping us change now. It was like a 180 turn, and I thought, if I can change her.
Yeah.
So that just gives me hope. And I know it's one person, but I'm saying that's the kind of thing we're up against, is that people that go, no, it's not that bad. You're wrong. You're just an angry, you're an angry daughter. You're angry. You're just upset. You wish your mom didn't die.
Right. I had I think my most memorable was a lady who sat with me the entire time Christopher was on life support. She was the nurse manager of the CICU floor. And she would come in and, talk to me, and my nurse, the nurse literally stayed with me the entire time. She never went home. She never took a day off, ever. She was with me the whole time. And her and I and the surgeon, she would braid my hair, and I would be laying on Christopher, and we would be talking. And so when they moved him downstairs and he started, waking up, I had the CICU nurse manager take me into the hallway and tell me, you have to stop. You have to stop yelling at people. You have to stop. If he wants help, he's going to get help. You can't get help for him. And I'm like, what? And she was like, no, he has to want the help. He has to ask for the help. You can't want it for him. So you need to stop, or you're not going to be able to come in here anymore.
That's ludicrous. It's insanity.
It's insanity. I was like, what? And she was like, no. Yeah.
So,
no.
right. So you imagine somebody like that who doesn't, who now has made a flip the other way. So you imagine how this is why these stories are so important, to get them out there so that people see the consistency in the stories, so they don't just, write you off.
Yeah.
And because it's too hard for many people, I have friends who have gone through terrible things with their parents, but they don't want to look at it. It's too hard.
What do I say?
I do.
People only understand to the level of their own understanding. So, and that's really sad, because you shouldn't have to have been through it to
be empathetic, to understand it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's why I'm doing this movie. That's why, so that people can see it from a human point of view, to really humanize it, so that they can't just go, well, they're old. Well, they're going to die anyway. Well, he was a drug addict. He was going to OD anyway. Who cares?
Right.
He's not worth anything. So, I mean, that's why these stories are so important. So thank you.
And unless we
Thank you.
unless we make the change, this is going to be all of our story. We're all going to experience this on some level, in some way. And
well, if we don't change
have to realize,
it,
even if you don't care about it now, it's us. You personally. It's going to happen to you.
That's what
unless
I
you're,
know.
You know,
that's going to be our story someday. You know.
Absolutely. So thank you, Jen. We really appreciate you.
Thank you, Jen.
And
thank you
for
reaching out and having me, Rick. It was really good to see you. Dawn and
same
Susie,
here.
it was really nice to meet you.
Ditto.
We'll be seeing, I'm sure we'll see each other soon, Jen. I look forward to seeing you again soon.
I'll be in
Washington again soon.
Yeah, we need. Well, I love that you're advocating and
Fighting
you're a
the
fierce
fight.
woman. And
You know what? I
you're
have
out
grandchildren now.
Yeah.
I have grandchildren
Me
now.
too.
Yeah.
Me
Yeah.
too.
17, 14, and 11. And
Wow.
oh my God,
Wow.
you know,
Yeah.
like this has to, we have to fix something. Or
Right.
I'm afraid, like my grandson last night, you know, I have him on my phone, and I'm like, I call my daughter, where is Evan? And she's like, he's at his friend's house. I'm all, where? He's all, why? And I go, do you know where he's at? Do you know the people he's with? Do you know? And she's all, you need to calm down. I'm all, no, you need to know. Because I'm just like psycho about it, you know? And so, like,
well, that's understandable.
we have to be out there and be loud, and we have to scream, and we have to still, you know, educate, because children are growing.
Educate. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And really show the love, like you. That's important. People will respond to that. The love that you had for your son, and the love that I had for my mom. You know.
Yeah.
So carry on, and why,
No, I
Dawn?
was just going to say, well, there's a reason for that, and that's because love is powerful, love is contagious, and love conquers alls. And we definitely thank Jen, our special co-host today, Rick Mountcastle. If you want to know more,
Rick.
you know, we have, thank you. We will have all the information about Jen and Rick and us in the show notes.
And check back with us because we're going to have some more stories. We're going to continue to tell stories. And if you have a story, you can go to nocountryforoldpeople.com, and there's a place you can upload your story. And if you think that, you know, you'd like to share it on the podcast, let us know, and we'll take a look at it. Because, like I said, we want to make change, and it's going to take a lot of us. So let's do this.
Let's
right,
do it.
Jen?
Let's do it.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.